Hello and welcome back to HEMAFightBreakdowns. Today we're going to be covering the finals match between Josias Arcadia and Shane Scallin for Tier A Longsword at Boar's Tooth. However, it was a pools match and there was no real final bout. It was simply the time in which the people who got first and second place happened to fight in the pools, which at the end of the day is just as good. They were both pretty much at the level of first and second when they fought each other, and of course that meant that the winner was pretty much guaranteed to get first and or second, depending on how they performed. But the other thing that's unusual about Boar's Tooth isn't just the pool matches, but the rule set that's sitting up next to my head. And as you can probably tell, it's unusual in that it is a combination of a priority rule set, a la Olympic fencing, and a target rule set, something like After Blow Nordic. And the idea here is that both of these rules and rule sets are being used in conjunction to determine a clean, unclean, or bad exchange and giving a point differential based on that. You can see that as complicated as it looks, there's actually only 3 outcomes of every single exchange. One person gets a point, one person gets -1 point, one person gets 0 points, the other person gets -1 point, or they both get -1. And the idea here is that it's almost reminiscent of a life point system as well, where the idea is that to get a positive number means that you got a clean exchange. You hit and you did not get hit. And thus, in order to have a positive number, as you can see down in the middle of the screen there, you need to be getting more clean exchanges than you are messy or doubly exchanges. So that's really the priority that they're going for with this rule set. I do think it kind of works out that way too. There's not a lot of easy ways to game this as far as I can tell. And the result is some pretty nice exchanges, although not a huge number of them. So our first exchange isn't exactly an exciting one, but it is an important one to watch because it helps you understand what has really changed in accordance to this rule set. And that is that the people who are going to be doing best are the people who have long stances, point forward guards, and sword work, and who can really accurately hit the hands or the closest targets to their sword, and then get out without getting hit back. And you see that really twice in this exchange. You see Josias here on the right go in for a little bit of a hand step of his own. Shane pulls his hands out of the way and gets that hand shot to miss. But the key difference here is that because Josias did not commit any further forward to land to a deep target, he didn't necessarily have to worry about being parry riposted, because even though he did miss, there really isn't much of an opportunity there to come back into measure and hit him back. At the end of the day, if you are already in the process of moving backwards as you go in for your hand strike, win or lose, hit or miss, you're going to be able to get back out of distance before your opponent really has a great chance of doing anything on their own, let alone doing something that goes for a deeper target. And just because everything is 1 point theoretically in a clean exchange doesn't mean that those deep targets are not juicy. However, Shane, who recognizes that we are playing the distance hand shot game, does one just a little bit more accurately. He comes forward into range, throws a nice little lunge, gets that hand shot in there, and Josias just accidentally punches the sword a little bit. He doesn't throw up a bad defense. He puts his crossguard directly into the path of where he thinks that shot is coming. It just shallows out enough to make it under the crossguard and into the hands and gives Shane his first clean exchange. So for this exchange, we have a rather exciting one. First off, in the middle of the exchange, there's an attempted double hand hit. Both fencers go in, try to hit each other in the hands, and lucky for them, get tangled up on each other's crossguards and manage to not hit either of them. Obviously, if they had both hit, they both would have lost 1 point, and that would have been pretty bad for everybody. But because nothing ends up happening, they separate and they wait for their next exchange. That next exchange comes when Shane goes in for a very large left Zverkow towards Josias' head. Now, as we were talking about earlier, you need to really close that distance if you want to make sure that you can hit a deep target. And Josias takes full advantage of the amount of distance that Shane has to cover in order to reach his head by hitting a shot to the arms and then having just enough time to lean out of the way, dodging that headshot and giving him a clean point. The reason this works is because Zverkows, unfortunately, both have a large preparation movement that makes the hand somewhat vulnerable, but also is a slightly shorter range attack than just a traditional cut towards the head, meaning that Shane not only had to cover a large amount of distance, he had to do so while exposing his hands as a target during the transition for that distance. And once he made it to the point where he was going to try to hit Josias in the head, he threw an attack that was slightly shorter ranged, which means he wasn't able to get there fast enough, and he was dodged effectively and gave a clean exchange to his opponent. So this is not the final exchange. This is just the final exchange that I have good footage of. And it is a much better exchange to end on, in my opinion, because it is a fantastically exciting one with lots of parry riposts and lots of attacks that just barely don't make it. As for the attacks that barely don't make it, we have a one-handed thrust from Shane that just makes a little bit of contact on the chest, but was not deemed by the judges to be quality enough to be stopped, and so it is not counted. And then later on, after a little bit of an exchange of blows, there's what looks to be another hand shot from Shane that apparently was not quite good enough to be determined by the judges to be quality, so it is also thrown out. But the one that is not thrown out is the left Zverko by Josias that is absolutely picture perfect. In these sources, one of the things that they tell you that you can do with Zverkos that is very hard to pull off is simultaneously attack and defend. And Josias pulls that off perfectly. He times exactly when Shane comes forward and throws perhaps a probing strike towards the head, but simultaneously cuts off the line of his high line by throwing that Zverko across the middle, hitting Shane in the shoulder and protecting his own head with a horizontal crossguard. This is a really difficult thing to do because it relies, one, on knowing exactly where your opponent is going to end up, and two, having the fact that your sword stops on your opponent's body not ruin the line closing capabilities of your Zverko. It requires you to put your hands in a position where your sword might be lagging behind and to have that kind of independent control of both the cutting surface of your blade and the defensive surface of your blade is something that's very, very advanced and difficult to pull off against force. But Josias pulls it off and gets a critical clean point here at the end. Now, as I said earlier, this is a finals pool match, which means that this did not technically determine the winner of the tournament. Shane ultimately ended up getting first place and Josias ended up getting second place. But in my mind, this was a really, really fantastic fight that could have been a final match between the people who ended up getting first and second place, and one in which there's a lot that you can learn from in terms of how to execute certain techniques, how to fight in a rule set in which your hands are a prime target, and how to make sure to never ever get afterblowed in as many ways as humanly possible. Also, as I'm hoping you noticed, there was more than a few animations and arrows in here that hopefully you are a fan of, and I will be putting into videos from now on. If not, I will see your angry comments down below, but I will see you on Thursday with some more arrows and some more glowy things.